Australia didn't wake up one morning and decide to ban social media for everyone under 16. This moment has been a long time coming, shaped by years of frustration, political battles, and a growing sense that the digital world has evolved faster than society can manage. And now, Australia has stepped into global headlines with a move no other democratic nation has fully attempted. A nationwide prohibition that forces every major platform, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, you name it, to verify user ages and shut down underage accounts. If a platform fails to comply, the fines can reach tens of millions of dollars. At first glance, this may sound like a dramatic, even exaggerated response to a familiar issue. Kids spending too much time online. But the truth is more complicated. This decision didn't emerge from nowhere. It represents the collision of social pressure, public health concerns, political will, and a deeper shift in how nations are beginning to understand and control the online structures that now shape young lives. So before we explore what this shift means for the world, let's start with the basics. What exactly did Australia do? And how does it work? In December 2025, Australia's new Online Safety Amendment Act officially comes into force. The core rule is surprisingly simple. No one under the age of 16 is allowed to use social media. Period. To make that a reality, the law requires platforms to do 3 things. 1. Block underage signups. Platforms can no longer rely on a checkbox or a fake birthday. They must actively prevent minors from creating accounts. 2. Detect and remove underage users. Existing accounts linked to minors must be suspended or shut down automatically. 3. Verify ages for new and existing users. This is the most significant change. Platforms must adopt government-approved age verification methods, which may include digital IDs, AI-based facial age estimation, or third-party verification systems. And if they fail to do any of this, they face fines of up to 50 million Australian dollars, roughly $33 million US dollars. This applies to every major platform you can think of. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, Twitch, Reddit, Discord, and even smaller community-based or interest-based networks. For the first time, the burden of keeping children off these platforms doesn't fall on parents, schools, or the kids themselves, it falls squarely on the companies. The Australian government frames it this way. If social media platforms cannot keep young people safe, then they should not have access to them. It's a bold statement, and one that sets the stage for a much larger conversation. One about government responsibility, corporate power, and the future of youth online engagement. But none of this makes sense unless we understand how Australia got here and why this moment matters. Australia didn't reach this moment suddenly. There wasn't one breaking point, one viral story, or one headline that pushed the country toward a nationwide ban. Instead, what happened was something slower. Something that built up over the past decade like pressure under a tectonic plate. And eventually, the pressure became too strong to ignore. If you rewind 10 years, Australia already had growing concerns about how digital platforms were shaping public life. Not just for children, for everyone. But with kids, the concerns began piling up in ways that felt undeniable. Parents noticed their children withdrawing from social spaces. Teachers reported increasing classroom anxiety and declining attention spans. Mental health professionals warned of a pattern they'd never seen before. Teenagers who couldn't separate their sense of self-worth from algorithm-driven feedback loops. And beneath all of it was a simple truth. Social media had become a place where young people were expected to be, even if being there wasn't necessarily good for them. Then came the data. Studies linking heavy social media use with higher rates of depression. Reports documenting years of inadequate moderation on platforms with millions of minors. Internal leaks showing big tech knew the risks, but moved slowly, often too slowly, to address them. Individually, any one of these concerns might not have triggered a national policy. But together, they formed a kind of quiet consensus across Australian society. This isn't sustainable. And Australia had already proven something important. It was willing to confront big tech directly. Back in 2021, the government forced Google and Facebook to negotiate payments with news publishers. It was one of the rare times a country successfully challenged Silicon Valley's dominance. And won. That experience reshaped the political imagination in Canberra. If they could force two of the world's largest companies to change how they operate it, maybe they could reshape the digital environment for young people too. There was also a cultural dimension. Australia is a country that consistently leans towards safety-first public policy. It has strict firearm regulations, strong public health protections, and a political climate that often prioritizes community well-being over individual risk-taking. So when it became clear that social media was affecting younger generations in unpredictable ways, the question for many policymakers wasn't should we act? It was, why haven't we acted already? By 2024, the political will had aligned. Mental health advocates, parent groups, and several state governments pushed for national action. And the momentum became impossible to stop. Which brings us to the present. Australia has moved from years of frustration into a concrete, enforceable ban. But not everyone agrees on whether this is the right path. As soon as the ban was announced, Australia found itself split into two strong, emotionally charged camps. Supporters believe the ban is overdue. They argue that for more than a decade, tech companies have accumulated enormous influence over young minds, while offering very little accountability in return. To supporters, this isn't about limiting freedom. It's about restoring balance. They point to stories of 13-year-olds who spiral into harmful content feeds, to bullying that follows kids home through their phones, to late-night scrolling that destroys sleep patterns and feeds insecurity. Their argument is simple. If platforms can't design systems that protect children, then children shouldn't be on those systems. For these supporters, Australia isn't overreaching. It's finally catching up. Opponents, however, see something very different. They worry that the ban strips young people of experiences that are essential in the modern world. Community, identity exploration, digital literacy, and the ability to participate in conversations that define their generation. Some argue that, ironically, banning social media could make certain kids more vulnerable, pushing them onto underground platforms, VPN networks, or anonymous apps where risks are even higher. Civil liberties groups have warned that this policy may set a precedent. Once governments start regulating youth access, what stops them from extending similar controls to other groups? And then there's the lawsuit. A group of teenagers has taken their objections all the way to the High Court, arguing that the ban violates Australia's implied freedom of political communication. The case raises a philosophical question that democracies everywhere will eventually have to answer. Do young people have a right to participate in online public life, even if that participation comes with significant risks? This divide between safety and freedom, protection and autonomy, is now shaping one of the most important digital debates of the decade. But regardless of which side you lean toward, there's a practical challenge that everyone has to confront. Even if the ban is justified, can it actually work? That's where we're heading next. Even if you agree with the idea of keeping young people off social media, there's a practical question that can't be avoided. How do you actually enforce something like this? Because the challenge isn't just political or cultural. It's technical. And the technical side is where the entire plan becomes far more complicated. Australia's ban relies heavily on age verification systems, many of which use AI to estimate a person's age based on a photo or short video clip. In theory, it sounds impressive. In reality, the results vary. A 14-year-old girl might be labeled as 22. A 26-year-old man might be identified as 17. The accuracy depends on lighting, angle, ethnicity, facial development, and the AI model's training data. Some systems boast high accuracy in controlled environments. But the real world is messy, unpredictable, and filled with teenagers who really want to outsmart filters designed to keep them out. And once a system misidentifies someone, what happens next? Does the platform block them? Ask for more personal data? Store their face scan? Every solution leads to a new problem. This is one of the strangest paradoxes of the ban. To protect minors from big tech, Australia's law may require big tech to collect even more sensitive information. Dates of birth, government IDs, biometric signatures, facial estimations. Suddenly, the platforms know not only what you do online, but exactly how old you are, and possibly what you look like in a standardized verification capture. Privacy advocates warn this creates a new kind of digital identity infrastructure, one that could outlast the policy itself. And if a data breach happens, or if these systems get repurposed later, the consequences could extend far beyond youth protection. Anyone who has spent time with teenagers knows one thing. If you try to block them from something, they will find a way around it. VPNs, alternative browsers, offshore apps not covered by Australian law, borrowed phones, shared accounts, or new platforms designed to hide from regulation by default. The risk is simple. If mainstream platforms become locked to under-16s, teenagers may migrate to digital spaces with no moderation, no reporting tools, and no oversight at all, which is arguably more dangerous than the problem the policy was meant to fix. Companies now face a harsh reality. If they misclassify a user, they risk massive fines. So what do? They overcorrect. Meaning, more aggressive account suspension, more false positives, more friction for normal users. In a world where platforms make money from scale and speed, age verification slows everything down. Whether that trade-off is worth it depends on one's values. But there's no denying, the technical foundation of the ban is shaky, and its unintended consequences may reshape how the internet works in ways we haven't yet considered. And that brings us to the bigger picture. Because Australia didn't just trigger a national debate, it triggered an international one. From an Asian perspective, what Australia has done is more than a domestic policy decision. It's a signal, a strong one, that the balance of power between nations and platforms is shifting, and other governments are watching very closely. In the U.S., lawmakers have talked about regulating social media for years. There were hearings, reports, high-profile testimonies, but little meaningful policy. The political gridlock is intense. Different parties disagree on what the problem even is, let alone how to solve it. But now the U.S. faces a new situation. If Australia demonstrates that strict youth protections are feasible, American states, or even Congress, may feel pressure to respond. Suddenly, Australia isn't just an outlier. It becomes a model. The European Union already has the world's strictest digital laws. GDPR, the Digital Services Act, and the AI Act. A youth-focused social media directive would align naturally with the continent's broader philosophy of digital rights. Some EU policymakers have already expressed interest. Because if one democratic nation can ban social media for minors, then the impossible suddenly becomes possible. Here's where the Asian perspective becomes important. Many Asian societies, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, have higher public acceptance of stricter digital governance when it is justified by safety. If Australia's approach gains traction internationally, Asia might not just follow. It might innovate. We could see stricter ID-based access systems, more reliable age verification technologies, education systems integrated with digital access permissions, unified parental dashboards for online behavior, or youth internet zones compliant with national standards. Australia might be the first domino, but Asia could accelerate the pattern in ways the West is not prepared for. When you put all of this together, something becomes clear. We are witnessing the early stages of a global shift. One where nations reclaim authority over online spaces that were previously governed almost entirely by private companies. For 20 years, big tech set the rules. But now, governments, especially mid-sized democracies like Australia, are beginning to write their own. Whether that leads to a safer digital world or a more restrictive one is. When you step back from the headlines, Australia's under-16 ban isn't just about safety or youth mental health, or even about holding big tech accountable. It's about something much larger. It's about who gets to define the rules of the digital world. For the past 20 years, platforms have operated with extraordinary autonomy. They decided what content we see, how information spreads, which voices get amplified, and how young people form their sense of identity. Governments reacted, but they didn't lead. Parents tried to keep up, but the technology moved faster than any household could reasonably manage. Schools tried to adapt, but the rules of online behavior were being rewritten every few months. And big tech continued to grow. faster, richer. But with this ban, Australia is sending a message. We're taking back part of that control. Not all of it. Not even most of it. But some of it. Enough to signal that societies are ready to renegotiate their relationship with the digital platforms that now shape modern life. And from an Asian perspective, this feels especially relevant. Asia is home to some of the world's most advanced digital infrastructures. And some of the population's most comfortable with technology-driven governance. People here are used to digital IDs, electronic payments, health apps, and government platforms that are deeply integrated with daily life. So when a country like Australia, a Western democracy, implements such a strong policy, it opens the door for Asian governments to go even further. Because once a precedent exists, once the unthinkable becomes something another country has already tried, the policy imagination expands. And beyond the policy, the ban raises deeper questions that every society must eventually answer. Should platforms be treated like utilities, or like entertainment companies? Do young people have an inherent right to participate in online culture? How much responsibility should governments assume over digital environments? And what happens when public safety and personal freedom collide? Australia's ban doesn't solve these questions. But it forces all of us to confront them. Because this isn't just about kids. It's about the future architecture of the internet itself. Which brings us to the next part of the story. Where does this lead? What comes next? At this moment, Australia stands at the beginning of an experiment. One that could reshape digital governance for the next decade. And depending on what happens next, I see three major scenarios. In this future, Australia's bold move becomes a catalyst. European regulators take interest. American states explore pilot programs. And Asian countries develop their own variations based on local norms. Once enough countries adopt youth restrictions, platforms will have no choice but to build age verification into their core design. We could see global identity frameworks, cross-platform verification systems, new digital youth modes, stricter onboarding requirements, and an internet where anonymity becomes harder to maintain. This would fundamentally reshape online culture. The internet would shift from the free-flowing, open-access environment we grew up with to something more structured, more identity-linked, and more governed. Whether that's better or worse depends on your values. But it would be a profound transformation. In this scenario, the platforms resist aggressively. They lobby. They litigate. They propose alternative solutions. Time limits for minors. Content restrictions. Algorithmic controls. Verified parent accounts. Teen-safe modes that limit what minors can see or do. Instead of a strict ban, the outcome becomes a negotiated compromise. Governments get more oversight. Platforms get more flexibility. And minors get a more controlled, regulated version of social media. Instead of being removed entirely. This scenario feels realistic. Not because the ban will fail, but because democratic systems naturally drift toward compromise. Platforms and governments both need public trust. And neither side wants to be blamed if something goes wrong. Australia's policy may become a prototype, but not the final blueprint. This is the most unpredictable outcome. If you shut teenagers out of mainstream platforms, they don't simply disappear from the digital world. They adapt. They find workarounds. They create parallel spaces. They congregate on apps with minimal oversight. Or on decentralized networks that are nearly impossible to monitor. VPN downloads spike. Anonymous chat platforms surge. Developers build apps specifically designed to evade regulation. Suddenly, the safest platforms for kids, the ones with content moderation and reporting tools, are the ones they can't legally use. And the dangerous ones, unregulated, anonymous, sometimes explicitly predatory, become the default gathering spaces. Ironically, the ban intended to safeguard young people might push them into environments with fewer safeguards than ever. This scenario is not guaranteed. But history tells us something important. Young people always find the edges of the system. How far the edges expand depends on how well the policy is implemented and how platforms respond. Australia's decision isn't just a national policy. It's the opening chapter of a global story that will shape how future generations grow up online. So now we're left with a question that goes far beyond Australia. Is this ban a necessary correction? A recalibration of an online world that has grown too fast, with too few safeguards for the young? Or is it something else? A signal that governments are beginning to assert deeper authority over the digital spaces that once existed far outside their reach? The truth is, it's probably both. Australia is taking a bold step. And like any bold step, it comes with risks. It may protect some kids. It may push others into darker corners of the internet. It may inspire other nations to introduce similar measures. Or it may spark a backlash that forces the policy to evolve. No one knows yet, because this is the beginning of a long, global experiment. What we do know is that the internet our generation grew up with, open, chaotic, unregulated, is evolving. The next version will be shaped not only by platforms and algorithms, but by lawmakers, parents, teachers, and young people themselves. And as this negotiation continues, we'll have to decide, together, what kind of digital world we want future generations to inherit. Do we prioritize safety, even if it comes with restrictions? Do we protect autonomy, even if it exposes young people to real harm? Or is there a balance we haven't discovered yet? Australia's decision forces us to confront these questions. Not someday, but now. And from where I stand, here in Asia, this moment feels larger than one country's policy. It feels like a shift. A recognition that the online world is no longer a separate universe. It's part of our social fabric, part of our politics, part of our identity. And when something becomes that important, societies will inevitably step in to reshape it. The only real question is, what comes next? Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you want to follow how this global story unfolds from an Asian perspective, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and join me next time as we explore. Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you want to follow how this global story unfolds from an Asian perspective, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and join me next time as we explore the forces reshaping our digital world.